Just kind of help me understand the journey of your career that's led to this moment.
Yeah. Really, before I even graduated high school, my mom's good friend gave me a job outlook handbook that said doctor, attorney, no, financial planner, yes. And so spent all of college. Uh, the school I went to was accredited in financial planning, completed all the coursework for financial planning, and then interned for 2.5 years before I even graduated from college. So it was kind of been down that track to begin with. And very early, after a year, 2, 3, getting my kind of feet underneath me in the industry, spent a lot of time at Morgan Stanley. Majority of my career as a financial advisor, 14 years. Most of it was at Morgan Stanley. And we developed a niche. I worked on part of a large team, and we worked with business owners, $3 to $30 million that were transitioning out in the next 1 to 3 years. That was our pitch. And it was, you learned really quick that there's a lot of pieces that go into prepare. We said we would help prepare the business at that point, but really from the large financial institution helping a business owner, it was more like, let's bring in a couple piecemeal people so that they figure out a couple things, but let's get them to sell so we can manage the money. And I realized, because growing up in Minnesota, a lot of the people that we were around were blue collar, baby boomer business owners that maybe didn't go to college, but had really good work ethic, had a really good product or service that they offered, really good hard worker. And they've grown to 40 million dollars. And as much as we were trying to provide financial advice, financial planning to a lot of people, they were really focused on the business. So you could see right out of the gate how important it was, the value that we were trying to provide for the business planning piece. And that was really a big eye-opener to me, that there was a ton of financial advisors, but people focusing on the business owner was really important. So I went back and did my MBA at the University of Chicago, focused solely on entrepreneurship, strategic management, operations management, how to help those lower middle market type businesses, 10 to $50 million, really enhance operations, enhance value, like what matters, what are buyers looking for. And then coming out of that, I was engaged in a couple entrepreneurship type ventures, but launched Your Legacy Partners with the sole focus of, look, we're going to flip this. Instead of a bunch of piecemeal pieces of different professions serving one little niche for an owner, let's focus solely on the business owner and try to take them through that entire journey that really focuses on them, enhancing value, getting that transaction right, finding the right buyer, what they're going to do after. So, long-winded answer, but
That's all right. That's all right. So you did. So you had that experience where inside of Morgan Stanley, that conversation of let's hurry up and get this business sold. Like what drives that need? Let's hurry up and get it sold.
Yeah, I mean, each profession, I'm thinking of attorney, accountant, financial advisor, the different pieces that get involved, they're doing that profession for a lot of different types of clientele. And so really at that point, what you see looking in now is that we were only really paid to either manage money, sometimes place trades, which is thankfully that part of the industry has moved away, but we're paid to manage money, right? So we're not paid at the sale of a business. We're not paid to help enhance value. We're not paid to get certain planning pieces right. We're not paid for a lot of different things. At that point, that mentality was like, look, how do we get more assets in the door? That's when a big kind of flaw of, I think, a lot of larger financial institutions is just that mentality. And so there wasn't the expertise in a lot of the different areas, but it was like, hey, if we can help them liquidate their business by maybe calling in a couple piecemeal people just to get it done, hey, there's more assets for us. And it's just a mentality that I think us especially have tried to move away from. Like, how can we really add value to this owner rather than just get it from one perspective?
And you've talked to me a little bit about kind of what happens when that equation is the way you described it. When this business owner, like the mid-market business owner, is surrounded by these pros, and that feeling of uncertainty or not necessarily knowing the path ahead, while you're surrounded by people who kind of have this very, very focused objective.
Yeah.
So when did you start noticing that?
It was a lot of the time working at a big financial institution, right? And again, you see that we talked about a lot of things, but for that business owner that really has only known their business, they don't have a lot of other assets necessarily, not a lot of retirement accounts. This business is their key to retirement income, to passing on a legacy, to funding children and college and weddings and all this different stuff. And so when you can talk to them about how to minimize taxes, how to enhance value, how the business can be set up for a leverage for what's next, that's things that people talk about the aha moment. You really don't think about as a business owner. You're focused on the day-to-day. You're focused, how do we get more revenue? How do we be more profitable? But missing out on, again, I think the biggest missed opportunity for business owners is not spending 2 years preparing for that exit. And I think we're just leaving a ton on the table for that. And when you're able to connect some dots for them is a big aha moment of, wow, okay, I didn't know what I didn't know, and nobody spent the time trying to connect all these dots for me. That's value. And that's what kind of was a passion for me to help those kinds of issues.
Because otherwise, I mean, what happens if you don't? We'll get to the 2 years in a second, but if you skip that part as a business owner in the preparation, you kind of mentioned the tax piece, like what's the outcomes if that gets skipped?
If what gets skipped?
The prep, the 2 years.
Prep. So again, huge missed opportunity. I think it's, there's two parts. I think one is the value enhancement of the business, and the other is planning what's going to come next for you, which is big. But the value enhancement piece, I would almost think of it like if you ran the first 25 miles of a marathon and then you handed off the last mile to somebody else, so that they crossed the finish line, they got the medal, they got the prize money, they got all the recognition. You've done all this work, and yet you're turning it over to these, there's almost an entire industry that's capitalizing on founders' inability to professionalize enough their business to maximize value. And so a lot of private equity, family office, independent sponsor, a lot of strategic buyers, a lot of these buyers are focused a lot on the theme of, hey, these founders had a good product or a good service, they worked really hard, but they're missing a ton of value in their business by not preparing it. We can just buy the business, professionalize it, we'll call it, and make money just off that.
So that value is on the other side of the line. So once that sale happens.
Absolutely. They're able to capture a lot of that value that I think, again, is a huge missed opportunity for owners.
What's the owner feel like if that happens?
I think a lot of people are unaware, right? They treat this like maybe selling a house, where, look, I'm just going to do what we're doing until I decide at some point we're ready to exit. And maybe I'll spend a month or two painting the walls and changing the carpet, and then we're going to list. We're going to get a bunch of offers in a couple weeks. We're going to decide which one works best for us, and we're going to get all our money and move on. That is not at all how selling a business works, especially for a lot of the $10 to $100 million businesses. There's a lot more involved in that. So they don't realize what they're missing out on. But I think once you exit and you see maybe what's happened to that business, sure, it's flourishing and growing and worth that, but you didn't get to capture that. You put in a lot of that effort, but it was captured after you left. You didn't get to harvest that value. And I think it's something that if you spend that time, you're able to at least capture the majority of that.
And so you've had to design an entire new system on how early you create relationships with these founders, the whole education front end. Just describe how much had to shift for you to create this new business type, where you actually go through that entire journey with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces that have to connect to really take full advantage. So it's not just the value enhancement. It's not just the financial planning. It's not just the tax strategies. It's not just the second act preparation. but being able to bring all of this around. So everything focuses on the business owner. And yes, we'll pull in experts where needed, but it really starts with a deep conversation of what matters to this owner, because that's going to lead to how we're approaching a lot of different things. So from really, whether we're focused on value enhancement pieces on individual pieces in the business or putting some specific strategies in place, some of these things can't be, they need at least a year or two to be put in place. A lot of the value enhancement things take time. A lot of the financial strategies might have a 2-year look back period where you're not going to get the tax advantage unless they're put in place 2 years before you have a sale arranged. And so if you're waiting to the end, and that's where a lot of times these owners don't see that, you just can't take advantage of those strategies because you miss out on that opportunity. But it's really been a change in thinking for the owner to say, great, let's start planning. Let's explore what our exit opportunities are. Most people think it's just selling to a third party. There's a number of different ways that you can exit, a different timing of how you can exit, and ways that you prepare your business, depending on which one of those works best for you, might involve different aspects and different levers that you're pulling in how to prepare your business and how to exit, and some of the strategies that you're going to use.
So what does somebody typically say to you when you start bringing up 2 years? Because if they're thinking they're on their way out, 2 years.
Well, the thing that I hear a lot is, I'm going to work for another 2 to 3 years and then I'm going to exit. And then I'm going to work and then in 2 or 3 years, I'm going to work for another 2 or 3 years and then I'm going to exit. So I think sometimes there's a little unknown, sometimes reluctance on when you're pulling this trigger, when's the right time. So we've tried to focus a little bit on how do we help determine when the right time is. But I think that they just don't understand, they don't know what they don't know as far as how long it takes and what really needs to be done. They don't realize that there's a lot of value that there is yet to be pulled out, and a lot of value that from the strategies and the planning that can be pulled out of the business, or they would have put those in place already.
And so there's 2 questions. You can kind of answer these in whatever order, but the shift is interesting because you're essentially changing teams, right? You're not necessarily on the finance team where it's let's hurry up and get this thing sold. You're changing teams and you're playing on that other side for ever, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to know if that was on purpose or if that was just kind of organic based on you seeing the value creation that's possible in these businesses. Also, the shift from where you're not necessarily just the transactional partner, you are you're tied to this founder who goes through this with you for the extent of that wealth management journey as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe the answer to both of those questions is it's really the focus on really trying to add value for the person. It's the human aspect, right? And for me, it was very personal, which helped because everybody I knew growing up, I feel like, was this, I kind of stereotype this, but a blue collar baby boomer business owner that didn't have the big financial knowledge, but had a great business. And I saw the good nature of those people, but just missing out, right? The rich keep getting richer, but yet they're still figuring out why I built this business. Why do I not have that opportunity? And so for me, coming from that, maybe a humble blue collar background, but then growing up in major financial institutions and a good school and being involved in some of that higher level, maybe investment strategy knowledge, and be like, okay, here's some of the things that you can actually do, but nobody that I've ever affiliated with when I was younger is aware of any of these types of strategies. So I think it was a genuine interest and care for I want to bring some of this stuff that some of these other elite people with big financial teams and big planning, like, hey, when I was at Morgan Stanley, they had a whole huge team of random people that would provide some of this expertise to massive businesses. A lot of these concepts can apply to Bob, the guy that runs the machine shop down the road that has a great business. And so it was the genuine great. I have genuine care and interest in wanting to help them. And it's not just a transaction. This is, let's go, and you have to start a couple years in advance because there's a lot of directions that you can go. And there's specific paths that you have to take where, okay, depending on what it is that you want, maybe you want to stay and work for a few years after you sell. Maybe you want to keep the name of the company. Maybe you want to retain equity in the business. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but how you set up the business for that matters. And the same with the financial strategy. So getting involved with them. And then once you've built that trust with them over that time, now we've put all these things into place. We actually have the money and we've harvested the value from that business. Wow, I've opened the door to all this meaning and purpose. And for us to stay involved, provide some of those connections, I think has been very impactful for a lot of the people that we worked with. We see those that have actually been able to capture that. It's almost like a click and say, wow, I realize now, a couple years into exiting, that what I've spent my life building was actually just a means to help me for something that I'm really, really passionate about. And this is true happiness. I love being able to do X, right? And so that motivation of getting involved early, helping here, staying involved long-term, the only way to operate and do that was to be a long-term true partner.
Yeah, you call it the second act.
Second
right?
act.
So, yeah, just how. Well, I guess just to kind of describe what that means. Like, what does second act mean to these founders or to the business?
Yeah, the second act just meaning what's next, what's life after business. And there was a study from the Exit Planning Institute, and they determined that 75% of owners, 75% that exited, profoundly regretted exiting 1 year after they exited. And so you say, why is that? Did they not get enough money? Wasn't that. Did they not like the buyer? It wasn't that. It was the lack of preparation for what comes next. And that's multiple. A lot of these people, it's identity is part of it, right? I've been the founder of ABC Technology, right? That's who I've been forever at the country club with friends in my neighborhood with my family. Or, hey, I'm the employer of 300 people in 7 locations across the Midwest because we do X, right? But that identity of, hold on, I'm no longer that, for some owners has been a big impact. But for others, it's, hey, we're done. We have this money now, this wealth that we've created, and I want it to be impactful to my family. But how do we preserve the values? How do we transfer values and not just transfer the wealth? There's good strategies to do that. But how do we transfer the values in some of the things that we're doing that we want to pass on? What is it that we want to pass on? And I think thirdly of the main things is that purpose, right? A lot of people say, hey, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to do some house things. I'm going to play golf. We're going to travel. Okay, fine. But after the year of doing plenty of that, what is it that you get fulfillment and enjoyment out of? And that's where I think, when you do a little planning and you discover that, and we'll talk with some owners that they get that early before they exit. Some it takes getting involved in some things during the process over time. Others, it's trying different things along the way, and you might find your passion. But finding some purpose and passion for not only what am I going to do with my days, but who do I want to spend it with? What impact am I making? What joy? What's going to bring me some joy in doing those things? And it's oftentimes more than just having the vacation home and playing a lot of golf.
Yeah, I've seen that too. As far as there's like a little bit of, there's almost like a scramble, right after the exit, because I've met some founders that have come through and if it was a business that I was helping to manage, it was almost like they were auditioning just to get a job again. And I think it's because their purpose is just such a drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've had a lot of owners that, maybe getting involved with, sitting on boards or getting involved in businesses. We have another aspect of some of the connections we make where we're making co-investments into other small businesses. And so owners have been able to, sit on the board or somehow be involved, whether part-time or full-time, with some of these businesses. And okay, that's what they really enjoyed, right? I get to mentor somebody else in this industry that I can bring a lot of value and knowledge to them, and that's bringing me a ton of joy, right? Others are, look, I'm spending time overseas working in these underprivileged areas, and that means a lot. Or my family, had a family member pass away from, you name it, ALS, right? And they're getting heavily involved in that. Or getting involved even with family things. Some of the larger end, they get involved in the kind of family office foundation type structure where you're able to create a tax advantaged entity that's allowing some of the family members to get involved. And now you're communicating values and working together and being able to make an impact together with families. So a lot of different things that resonate with the different people, but it's just discovering what it is for you. And I think once you're able to, unlock that, there's a whole different, the owners that do that, I just see the happiness. And it's like, once I've seen, a few of those people, it was like, wow, that is what I need to help a lot of people get to, because that's a whole different level of happiness that we see from them.
Yeah. I mean, are they surprised when you see so when you actually increase that overall value that they get to extract, is there surprise? I mean, you're with them for a lot of time, and I'm sure it's very hands-on, but do they know what they're about to get into and the opportunities that because that was a career business?
Yeah, right? I think a lot of owners, and rightfully so, are caught up in, I think I'll kind of categorize it as tangible capital and intangible capital, but focused on, great, how do we grow revenue? How do we increase profits? Let's go. I need a better product. I need a better service. We need to grow revenue. How do we grow? How do we grow? And that's not wrong. But I think a lot of, kind of to your question, what they are surprised at, if they knew the level of maybe pieces that they were missing, they would have certainly put them in place, but not everybody has that knowledge set, right? You were the business owner focused on XYZ, and you did a really good job at that. But to see that, oh my gosh, spending time on some of these intangible capital things was really what made this extremely attractive to more buyers, warranting a higher multiple, a higher price, more competition, and better able to find a really good fit that resonated with the things that I wanted to happen to the business and how I want to exit.
What is that experience like? The buyer, I mean, is it auditioning for the buyers, or how does that, when you actually have a business of great value, what is that like? Talking to the businesses, talking to the buyers, because I've heard some horror stories, right?
It's exciting. And, don't get me wrong, there's, especially early in the career, I guess or things maybe you've taken on for a referral or something that maybe just said, we want to go to market, right? And you see firsthand when you take a business and there's not a lot of response. Might be a great industry, really great owner, and he or she might think they have a good practice or business, but there's just no demand. And obviously that's massively impacting value. But you see that side of it. And you, early on in the career, you started to see why. Like, hey, okay, we had a couple people look at the business. They weren't interested. Why was it that you weren't interested? And so you get to hear those. But to your point, seeing that once you've done that and you've put a lot of these pieces in place, and now we're running an open competitive process to bring in the exact type of buyer that we want. Now it's like you're in the driver's seat, you're in control, and it's very exciting, I think is a great word to show how they feel. Because you're getting multiple offers, but you're able to, first off, chat with each one to say, hey, this is truly what I want, right? I want X, I want to exit this way, I want to be involved in this way, these key people, but you have that leverage now, right? If you haven't built it to that, you probably have less people interested, and you have to cater a little bit. Okay, this person's offering a decent amount more, but they want to completely remove the name of the company. They're going to strip out a couple people. They want to take it down a slightly different path. To get what you want, there's really only one, maybe two other buyers. They're offering a decent amount less, so now you're sacrificing a decent amount. But when you get, hey, we've done a really good job, and a perfect exit, but we've done a really good job. We have a lot of people. We're able to get multiple people that see that value, that want to pay for that value, and want to structure it or move it forward in the way that really has meaning for me, with the people, with the company name, with the direction, with the products, and that's exciting. And so you go through the competitive vetting process. You have multiple LOIs, which are offers, that we get to counter and say, hey, we have 5 offers higher than you, but we really like you. If you can meet us halfway or get to this level, we'd love to do the deal with you. But it's really exciting, a lot of control, but you want to do a fair deal, but it's exciting is a good word.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned leverage, and that's kind of, you got to imagine if you're in a career role, like you founded a business and that's been your career and that's what like you have leverage over that business. Like you are the most knowledgeable, the space, the team, all the gears of that business. You know how to turn it. I think maintaining that, like having that leverage in those conversations, that's unbelievable. Just because you only get to do this once, right?
Yeah.
You only get to sell the business one time.
And to see the happiness, really, truly genuine happiness from when you get to do that, like, oh my gosh, we put pitch books together, or the SIM, the Confidential Investment Memorandum, and they're like, wow, this business, I would buy this business, right? Like you own this business, right? Because it's great, and they see the stuff that they've done and some of the enhancement we've made, and the way that we portray it to the potential buyers because of some of the things that we've done, we're able to communicate a lot of strengths, and that's just genuine happiness. But to see the other side, I think, is also really resonates with me when you say that, because, again, early on we've had, where it's, okay, I really want this, but I'm not going to get it. I really want, these couple things are very important to me, and we're just not going to get that. That's not an option. So which lever do I choose, right? And that's where it really resonates, like, man, that's a missed opportunity. But to see those things come together for owners is great, and a lot of the owners I find are really interested. They say it, at least, and for most of them it's true. The most important things are the employees and the customers, right? And if you get that part right, and you've done these things to enhance the value and done the planning, and you're able to exit, the buyer that you're bringing in, or if you're transitioning internally or whatever you decide to do, those things are going to be able to continue the way that you wanted that to happen, right? That culture, your employee retention, the service and level of care that your customers are getting. And I think that's what people see as well, and really bring some additional value, happiness.
That's cool. And it feels like a bit of a shift. So I actually want to know, kind of bring me into the gears of your business and what it looks like, and if you're really working with everybody, because it's this, when you add that 2 years up front, that work together, it's less of a volume play. It's less of a, let's hurry up and get this thing sold so that we can get to the next one, just kind of move everybody, like shift everybody to wealth management as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So if I start working with you, what does it look like?
Yeah, I really try to be heavily involved with every owner throughout the process. I think some of the experiences and pieces that are brought to the table, but really the ability to extract what's important and cater something to them. I want to be there for that. I want to be the one working with them, understanding, being able to connect the dots. I think some of the experiences that I've had kind of help that be a successful process. And so coming in, I'm the one meeting with them directly. It's oftentimes, that first discovery phase during the first probably 2 to 3 months is really where we just get down and deep, down and dirty, down and deep, and have some deep discussions with the owners, mostly around what's important. What's important with the business, what's important with family, what's important with values, what's important with legacy. And so spending those time having those conversations is extremely rewarding for me, but very productive for setting the stage for what's going to happen next. Because then we discover which path are we going to go down, which takes a little bit of time, but we're really able to uncover those things that have meaning. So getting involved during those first 2 years prior to exiting is really the uncovering, working one-on-one with the owner. Yes, we'll involve other people, but it's a real personal, deep conversation, determining path experience.
So just that division between, there's kind of like players and there's people that know finance, and then there's going to be the mid-market businesses where they know their businesses, but they don't know the game and not really know how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like it keeps this division in place.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're really unlocking is you're essentially opening the door for the people who know their businesses to get on that side of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're building in the leverage. It's not necessarily just building their business, but you're teaching them how to own those points of leverage. You're next to them the whole time, so that by the time they're done with this thing, they're now on that other side of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just like that divide starts to vanish if you do this 2 years up front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, I think that's the purpose you're talking about, to where they just didn't think they were going to get there.
Yeah.
Like, this job is hard. Running a machine shop is really hard.
Yeah. And I think you have to look too at, what have been their options to this point, right? And I don't want to talk negative about any segment of the industry, but if you work with a business broker, right?
People do, just so you know.
A traditional business broker, right? I think you're going to get oftentimes a career changer, not a deep 20, 30-year industry expertise, and certainly not spanning across, financial planning, tax minimization strategies, ongoing legacy. It's solely the execution of a transaction. So I would characterize business broker as being maybe a little bit lower end. They're going to sell the neighborhood jewelry store or restaurant or something like that. And I just don't think the owners are getting the level of professionalism and full range of really focused on me from the beginning to the end. Because number one, that broker doesn't have the knowledge or expertise to do that. And number two, they're not going to get paid on it. So they're not incentivized to do that. They're going to execute the transaction at a less sophisticated level, I would say, than they deserve. At the other end of the spectrum, you're looking at like large investment banks. And they're going to have a 6-digit retainer up front that you have to pay. And you're still going to get junior members of the team, right? These large investment banks are working on public company deals, billion-dollar deals. And sure, are they going to put, massive people to work? And it's still just focused on the transaction. They're not focused on, a couple years ahead or what are you going to do after, solely on the transaction, but you're paying tons of money for that. But you're still not getting the top talent from that firm because those people are focused on huge deals. And so you're left with, neither one of those options is good. Different professions, again, your financial advisor, your attorney, your accountant, different people, they don't have the expertise to move along, beginning to end in that process. So where these owners have been left at is it's either piecemeal or I'm not getting the expertise that I need. And so where do I go to get this, right? And they don't know any better. When I sold my house, I just got a real estate agent and I did the deal. Isn't that how this works? But it's not. It can be, but that's why you're missing, 30, 50, sometimes 100% increase in value and the amount that you keep. And the impact is magnified if you get the extra capital from the business. And then you're able to put that in strategies and leverage that for what you're doing next and how you're passing that along and how you're making an impact and how that's impacting your legacy is multiples. And so for someone to work with them at different stages, I just don't think that's been available in the market. And so kind of given the background and experiences that we've had, we pivoted that a number of years ago to say, look, we're going to come up with a business model that's sustainable, but that can work with them for the long run solely on the business owner, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to harvest that value. So yes, we're going to be able to be, paid appropriately so that we function and sustain as a business, but that's going to allow us to spend the time and deliver the value that these other business models, it's not set up to do that. You're going to get piecemeal, or you're going to get, not quite experienced enough, or not getting enough dedication to your company and your situation.
Yeah, and you just talk about that focus on that transaction, like that transaction is it's like the shortest part, but it's what everybody romanticizes about, right? Because it's like the deal is going to happen. There's a lot of cash that transfers there, but that second act, that's like a 30, 40, or sometimes 50-year game that you have to figure out.
Yeah, there's it is, and that second act, there's a stat that only 25% of the wealth actually makes it to the second generation. Only 10% makes it to the third, and only 5% makes it to the fourth. And when we talk about that second act, and you talk, especially with some of the higher end businesses too, if you've done a good job in building the business, enhancing the value, utilizing some strategies, you probably have more capital than you will need for the rest of your life, which is a great position to be in. But now it comes to, how am I efficiently passing that on? But really, more importantly, what are the values that I want to pass on to my children? What is the impact I want to leave in the community? What is the legacy I want to have on the world or whatever? And that's where planning, not only for your own retirement income, your identity, your purpose, but how those things are going to play out, I think is very fulfilling, but also now are impactful, right? How come the rich keep getting richer? Well, they're doing this planning, they're using these strategies. You just weren't quite aware of it. We're helping bring this to you, but you weren't aware of it, right? If you waited till 3 months before you're going to sell, you can't do it. That's why nobody ever mentioned it to you, right? But if you do that, now you have the ability to create that impact, to say, hey, your problem now is, how am I going to make sure that my kids maintain the values that I want? How am I going to make sure my grandchildren are still good people and not just living off, free money, and their quality of life or the quality of person is going down from where it could have been had we ingrained some of these values and things in that, or made an impact on the world in this way.
Nice. So that's like the real payoff, is just making sure that that's plugged in too. So that's part of the 2-year work too.
And now we're talking about, bridging that gap. Okay, great. Everybody's excited because we sold, and that's a lot of money. And regardless of if you maximize value or not, that's still probably a lot of money. But when you do it right and you're saying, hey, I've actually been able to move up into this different level where I'm not worrying about, not necessarily paycheck to paycheck, or am I going to have enough money, but hey, we have this. I have a legacy. What's it going to be? How do I make sure that we're making and impacting, communicating values and those things? It's just a different level of, okay, we've made it, and now we want to kind of manage and control a little bit of what that ongoing legacy and impact is. And I think that's where we see people get really excited, and that really a lot of meaning, a lot of purpose.
So something I'm curious about, like what draws you to this? Because everything you just said sounds harder. It's harder and it takes more time. Like, what are you getting out of this?
Yeah, like we talked about the passion, what drives and motivates you. It's truly, honestly, that. It's truly seeing, the people that, again, I keep going back to this stereotypical person, but it's the people that I grew up around. It's people that I've cared about. And it's the ability, the reward for seeing the value and difference you can make for these people is truly 100% what drives that. And handing it off to somebody, involving somebody else, great. They're probably not getting, maybe it's a little control on my part, but it's not getting the level of care that I know that they deserve, and attention and detail, where I know if we're going to spend that time, we're involved at multiple stages. we're going to do well as a business. We're involved in lots of areas, so we don't do it for free. We get paid, but the fulfillment and gratitude that comes from bringing more sophisticated strategies that I think larger companies and we view as the wealthy and the rich getting richer, down to people who have been good, hardworking, good values people, and able to bring some of that to them, is the passion purpose piece that resonates with me. I love every day of what I do. And I think spending time with them and being able to see the beginning to the end is a purposeful, meaning, passion that is limitless.
Yeah, so you're going to stick with this one then.
Love this.